Hello students, so this is your second video on the chapter Circulatory System, and today we are going to start from the heart. So let's read about heart first. So what is heart? The human heart is a muscular organ of the size of one's fist, and it is located at the center of the chest cavity, pointing slightly to the left, okay, and situated between the two lungs. And what is the function of the heart? It pumps blood into the blood vessels in order to keep it circulating throughout the body. And the walls of the heart are made up of specialized cardiac muscles. Which muscles? Cardiac muscles that contract and relax rhythmically. And our heart works tirelessly throughout our life. So here you can see the structure of the heart. It has various parts. So here this one is the pulmonary artery. So what is its function? It takes oxygenated blood from where? From heart to the lungs for oxygenation. Next is pulmonary vein, and it brings oxygen rich blood from lungs into the heart, into the left atrium. So this is the left atrium. Next, left atrium. So left atrium does what? It pumps oxygenated blood into the left ventricle. So this is the atrium part and this is the ventricle part. Okay, next, bicuspid valve. So here you can see the valve. This is called bicuspid valve. So it permits blood flow from left atrium to the left ventricle. The pulmonary vein brings oxygenated blood from the lungs to this left atrium. Then through this valve, that is bicuspid valve, it goes into the left ventricle. After that, what happens? See, after that, from this left ventricle, the blood pumped into the aorta. From aorta to different body parts. So here, while it is going from left ventricle into the aorta, there is another valve whose name is aortic semilunar valve. So through this aortic semilunar valve, the blood pumped from left ventricle to aorta. Next, superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. So here you can see those superior and inferior. This part is the superior vena cava and this one is the inferior vena cava. So it brings deoxygenated blood. So superior vena cava returns the deoxygenated blood from the upper half of the body to the right atrium, and inferior vena cava returns deoxygenated blood from the lower half of the body to the right atrium. Now here is another valve called pulmonary semilunar valve. So what is the function of pulmonary semilunar valve? As it is present here, means first of all, the superior and inferior vena cava brings deoxygenated blood from different body parts into the right atrium. Then through this right atrium, the deoxygenated blood passes into right ventricle. So between this right atrium and ventricle, there is another valve called tricuspid valve. This is called tricuspid, this one. So tricuspid valve permit blood to flow from right atrium to right ventricle only. And from this right ventricle, the blood then passes into the pulmonary artery, from where it will go into the lungs for oxygenation. So the blood passes through another valve called pulmonary semilunar valve that pump blood into the pulmonary artery. From where? From this right ventricle. So again, just recapitulate it. So here is your left atrium and left ventricle. In between there is bicuspid valve, and this side is your right atrium and right ventricle, and in between is tricuspid valve. So pulmonary vein brings oxygenated blood from lungs to the left atrium. Then through this bicuspid valve it goes into the left ventricle, and from here to aorta through aortic semilunar valve. But in this case, superior and inferior vena cava brings deoxygenated blood from the body into the right atrium. Then it passes into the right ventricle through tricuspid valve, and from this right ventricle it just passes into pulmonary artery, and there is another valve, that is pulmonary semilunar valve. Now the question is, why this oxygenated and deoxygenated blood do not mix inside the heart? So the reason is, there is a wall called septum present in the middle of the heart that divides the left side of the heart from the right. Thus it prevents the intermixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. So now we already know that which blood vessels entering the heart. They are superior and inferior vena cava that bring deoxygenated blood from different body parts, and another one is pulmonary vein which bring oxygenated blood from the lungs. Which blood vessels leaving the heart? That is, the first one is largest artery called aorta that leaves the left ventricle carrying oxygenated blood to all body parts, and another one is pulmonary artery that leaves the right ventricle carrying deoxygenated blood to the lungs. For what? For oxygenation. So we have also discussed about the valve, that is bicuspid or tricuspid. They are also called auriculoventricular valve, and these valves actually regulate the flow of blood inside the heart. But there are two more valves present at the junction of the ventricle and the arteries leaving the heart. These are pulmonary semilunar valve and another one is aortic semilunar valve. Next is circulation of blood in the body. So the continuous flow of blood inside the body is called blood circulation. So there are two types of circulatory pathway. One is pulmonary circulation, another one is systemic circulation. In case of pulmonary circulation, the blood transports between the heart and the lungs. So this is called pulmonary circulation. What happens in this case? Deoxygenated blood from the right side of the heart flows into the lungs. This one. Okay, and the oxygenated blood from the lungs flows to the left side of the heart. Next is systemic circulation. So here it is a longer path, and the previous one, the pulmonary circulation, was shorter path. So in case of systemic circulation, the transportation of blood takes place between the heart and the entire body part. In this case, oxygenated blood from the left side of the heart flows to the rest of the body, and the deoxygenated blood from the body cell is then returned to the right side of the body. Next is blood flow through the heart. So these things we have already discussed, that from where the oxygenated and the deoxygenated blood flows and which part of the heart receives oxygenated or deoxygenated blood. So we also call it double circulation. Why? Because the blood flows twice through the heart before it completes one full circulation in the human body. Next is pulse. So what is pulse? So the contraction of the ventricle forces blood into the arteries. The walls of the arteries suddenly expand and then relax due to high pressure during the inflow of blood, and this generates a wave of pressure called pulse that passes along the arteries. So what is the definition? A pulse is defined as the pressure wave transmitted through the arteries as the ventricular contraction forces fresh blood into it. So when the ventricles of the heart contract, we feel pressure in the arteries. So that force, that wave that is that transmit through those arteries, we can feel that. So it can be felt by pressing the index finger and the third finger on the wrist below the base of the thumb. So you can also feel it by pressing your index finger and the third finger on your wrist. Next is heartbeat. So one complete contraction and relaxation of the heart makes up a heartbeat. So this heartbeat creates sounds. They are lub and dub. So these sounds are produced when those valves, that is atrioventricular valve and semilunar valves of the heart, close respectively when the blood flows in and out of the heart. So the average rate of heartbeat of a person is about 72 times per minute. There is a medical device called stethoscope which one can hear a person's heartbeats because it amplifies the sound of the heart. Next is blood pressure. So what is blood pressure? The pressure exerted by blood on the walls of the arteries. So what happens here? See, during the contraction of the heart, the blood is pumped out at maximum high pressure. And so this happens during contraction. But when the heart relaxes, this pressure falls to a minimum. So this maximum and minimum values together determine the blood pressure. So the normal blood pressure in a healthy person is taken as 120/80 mmHg. That is, mmHg stands for millimeter of mercury as measured by the instrument. So this is the numerator, we can say, and this is the denominator. So the numerator is the value during contraction and denominator is the value during relaxation. And here the device called sphygmomanometer is used to measure blood pressure. Okay, so how we can keep our heart healthy? So we can keep it healthy by doing some activities such as brisk walking, skipping, jogging, swimming, cycling, or playing some outdoor games, etc. Not even this, even we should eat healthy. So healthy eating habit is also important. So now what causes a heart attack? See, this sedentary lifestyles or nowadays we consume fast food or many other things, oily food and all. So those fatty foods lead to deposition of fat, that is cholesterol, along the walls of the arteries. And this increases the blood pressure and may even cause a heart attack. Next is effects of increased physical activity. So how physical activities affects our body? See, to perform vigorous exercise, muscles need to work faster. For this, muscle cells must receive more oxygen to produce a higher amount of energy, that is ATP. That is why during vigorous exercise, more oxygen is needed by the muscle cells than when the body is at rest. Now the question is why we feel pain on our muscles after doing strenuous or heavy exercises. See, during heavy exercises, oxygen demand is more and the supply may not be sufficient to meet the needs. So the glucose is broken down by the body in the absence of oxygen. That means anaerobic respiration occurs, which result in the formation of lactic acid in the muscles. So yes, the energy that is released during this anaerobic respiration is much less than in the presence of oxygen, that is during aerobic respiration. And this lactic acid makes muscle tissue acidic, which causes muscle pain or muscle fatigue.